Sports has a great connection with communities. And I often say that you can't measure an impact on a community just monetarily, just by wins and losses. And to me, that's one of the great things about sports is it can help uplift a community and bring positive emotion, especially to a community that needs it. And in December of 2019, as we approach the end of the decade, we saw sports help a community that went through arguably one of the darkest days a community could ever go through. December 14th, 2012 is a date that no one in the state of Connecticut will ever forget. It was the day of the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting, where 26 people, educators, and young children were gunned down and lost their lives. And as we end this decade, unfortunately, that's not the end of the story. We have seen school shootings continuing to happen, and I pray that we will never have to see another school shooting, because these are kids with a bright future ahead of them and have so much potential ahead of them. And it's become almost a statistic, unfortunately, about school shootings every year. And it breaks my heart because this is something that should not happen. Kids should not be worried about going to school and about their safety. They should just be going there to learn. But this was a story that impacted me very deeply on a couple of fronts. Number one, I live in the state of Connecticut, very close to Sandy Hook Elementary School, about half an hour away. And often I would take my sister out to college through the town of Sandy Hook, right in the vicinity of that elementary school. As people, I think one of the things we always do as a defense mechanism is tell ourselves, it could never happen to us. When you're a kid sitting through those drunk driver school assemblies, you can say, that can never happen to me. But it could happen to someone that you deeply care about. And when it does happen, it sticks with you. And the reason it really stuck with me is because both of my parents are teachers. My mother was a pre-K teacher, now a lower school science teacher, and my dad was a math teacher in high school. And this one stuck with me because if this could happen in my state, in a school close to me, it made me think about my parents. And it made me think, thank God they are alive. Thank God they weren't involved in this. But it makes you think, especially if you have children, no children, or educators that go to school, every time a school shooting comes up, you keep saying it will never happen to you. But when it happens in your own backyard, it makes you think. And I've also had the unique perspective of being a football referee. I've refereed a lot of JV and youth games in actually Newtown. And it's a very strange feeling when you're talking to these kids and you're talking to these parents and you're talking to these coaches. And I can tell you this, Newtown cares about their sports scene. They are well invested in their kids' future. There is a great sense of community there. And you heard about it after the shooting of how strong that community was. But until you're in it, until you see it, that's when you feel it. But the weirdest thing, when I was standing on those sidelines reffing, the thought kept going into the back of my head was, is there someone on this team that lost a brother? Was there someone that was supposed to be on this team that was no longer here? My God, are one of these parents or one of these coaches, could they have lost a kid? You can feel it. It doesn't have to be said verbally. But you can feel it in the air when you walk around that town. When you go to events, there is an uneasiness because it's a scar that will never heal. We are talking about 20 kids and 6 teachers that can no longer have an impact on this world. And I can remember reffing, and you'd see on the back of the helmets of all the Newtown players at every level, they'd have the number 26. And they'd always have green apparel on special days. And you could feel that that event is still very fresh, and rightfully so. I mean, just saying that it was 7 years ago, it feels like it was just yesterday. But to me, one of the best sports stories, without question, this year, and I would make a case for this decade, is what happened this past week with Newtown winning the state championship. 7 years to the date where this tragedy occurred. And you could feel it in the celebration, a release of joy, of showing emotion, and how happy this made this community feel. And for a brief moment, it helped ease the pain. Because the pain will never fully be gone. Because when you say the number 26, it's more than just 26 people. You can't put a number on the amount of people and family members that impacted directly or indirectly. You can never do that. And it's a wound in that community. It will never heal. But just seeing that community, even for a brief moment, having fun, being able to enjoy something together as a community, where football is the community's pride and joy. They love football from the youth level all the way up to high school. The kids have passion for it. The parents, it is a community that loves the sport and, more importantly, loves to give back. And you can feel it deep. There are communities where you feel football, it's an activity. In Newtown, it's a way of life. And it's a way of joining the community. And to see the impact that this win has had, even briefly, because when you think about it, some of those kids that aren't with us anymore, they'd be entering high school. They would be a part of this. And it's unfortunate they can't be. But for a community that has been beaten down by a horrific act that you pray will never happen to your community, and how they've been able to not only be able to move forward, but to move forward with pride and be active in the community and be active nationally, trying to push gun regulations to help make sure that another Sandy Hook never occurs. You can feel how much this had an impact on the community. And it's one of the few things that I've ever seen that really impacted me, because I've seen it firsthand. It's one thing you hear a story and you're thinking, that's a nice story. That's a feel-good moment. But when you've seen the impact it's had firsthand, when you've seen the people it's hurt, and when you've seen the impact of what it really means to that community, it really makes you appreciate the value of sports. Because they will never forget what happened on that day in 2012. No one will ever forget. But now when they think about that date, even for a brief moment, just to feel better, they can think about this win. And it's not just a football win. It's a sign that this community was able to continue to move forward despite everything it had been dealt. That football team represents that community. How tightly knit and how they all have been through hell together. But despite everything that they have been dealt, despite being dealt a tragedy, and despite the fact that the pain will never truly go away, they've been able to continue to move forward as a community together, to not only get through it, but to make the world a better place.